The MQTT Plug-In. OPC Router, the communication middleware. Welcome to our tutorial video on the MQTT plugin. Today I will show you how to use the MQTT plugin. And as always, when using OPC Router, you use the icons here on the very left side, starting with the puzzle icon, which gives you the list of all plugins. When you want to use a plugin, you first have to configure it. So when I double click on it, it would open a tab here in this middle section, which is my workbench, where I can set up, configure all brokers that I want to communicate with. In this case, I'm running only one broker on my local machine. So when I double click on it, I basically define a name and then choose the profile. In this case, it's a standard broker supporting any broker that is set up correctly. The connection properties then is where you define the IP address, a port, possibly encryption. You create a unique client ID. If communicating encrypted, you would also specify the OPC router's client certificate here. And then, of course, the service level. We do support all service types specified. And at the end, you would simply click check connection. Once you have the connection established, you can use it. For interruptions of a connection, you can also specify a first and a last will according to the specification. But when you have a connection established, you can basically start using this plugin. Interesting, for example, could be if you create a new connection here, you can choose some cloud-based brokers. And when you do that, the tab up here changes and it would change the terminology according to the provider you choose. So for example, if you choose Google and they provide a project ID, then you know where you have to fill it in. So the profiles can be very helpful when you have one of these cloud-based brokers. In this case, I will choose or use the local broker so that wouldn't make any difference when using OPC router. And the next step then would be creating connections. As always, it starts with creating a folder to structure your project and then doing the connections. When using OPC router, we always need to have a third-party broker to communicate with. OPC router can only send information or receive information from a broker. So we are either the publisher or, when receiving information, the subscriber. So we will have two connections. The first one is the publisher, which is sending information to a broker. And the second one would then be the subscriber, which receives information from a broker. So I start creating the publishing connection. For that purpose, from the transfer objects list here, which I use in order to create a connection to transfer data between systems, I choose the MQTT transfer object. The information will be wrapped in a JSON file, and the information is retrieved from an OPC server. When retrieving information from an OPC server, you usually use here the transfer objects that are related to OPC communication. In this case, I would do a combined chain communication setup. So I would choose the multi-data change trigger. That is a trigger as well as a transfer object that is supplying information. So you always need a trigger and a couple of transfer objects. In this case, when using the multi-data change trigger, you define the OPC server you want to communicate with, and then not a single OPC tag, but a whole tag group. So when specifying the folder current data, the tag group, then everything is, or all OPC tags within that tag group are being subscribed to by OPC router. This is a nice way in order to retrieve data or tag values from a couple, meaning could be 10,000 of tags within one tag group. And you would do all that with only one connection in OPC router. So now I will configure then the JSON transfer object, starting with either programming myself, copy pasting, or using the assistant. So here in the assistant, you simply give it a name and the type, which is value here. So you can basically have any kind of structure, arrays, values, an array of objects. So there should be no limitations when using this JSON write transfer object. The next one would then be the quality ID and maybe the item name and the value time. And I want to choose all of them. So here in this column here, you only have to specify the name as input-output nodes, in this case input nodes, and then the JSON expression based on JSON parse, which you can use in order to query your JSON document when you have more complex data structures. And then, as always, you let OPC router do the matching. And this will create a JSON object. And then finally, you specify the broker connection, the quality of service. I let the setting like it is in the plugin. The kind of data, this could be binary or string, and the format. Since it's string, I would use Unicode. And finally, of course, the topic that you want to send the data to, and that other clients, meaning the subscribers, will also use in order to receive the information. And then you say OK. And the payload will be the JSON document. Next step would be the subscriber. The logic here is when receiving information, we don't use transfer objects, but we put the object in the trigger section. So sending information to MQTT would be the transfer object. Receiving information, being the subscriber, is placed here in the trigger section. And here you go, you say which broker, quality of service, of course, payload data type, and the topic. And that would be production data, since that is being used here as well. In the next step, you simply copy paste the JSON structure because you want to use it here again, just to show you how to pass an incoming JSON object. So you don't have to redo everything. I want to choose all information of it and say OK. So my payload, of course, is the JSON. I pass the values and I can do anything with them. I could send them to a database, write them to an OPC server, anything. There's no limitation regarding type or number of transfer objects. In this case, just to show you the output, I would choose variables. Variables are actually a good way in order to test your connections, to store values, and so on. So variables are useful. And just to show you the parsing output, I will simply write some values to variables. And that's basically it. The publisher will send all the OPC data to JSON documents and then publish them to the broker. And the subscriber will watch that, retrieve the information from the broker, reparse the JSON object, and then show you the output. And when I publish my two connections now, they're being copied over to the OPC router runtime. And then OPC router will initialize the connection to the broker and the OPC server. So we see there are some changing values here for amount, scrap, temperature, and so on. Each of them being subscribed to because they're in the same tag group within one connection. For each change, we retrieve an array for all values that are changed. OPC router will write one JSON document for each of them. And then the ready to use JSON payload is sent to the broker. And in the second connection, the MQTT broker that has subscribed to the same topic retrieves the payload in the JSON read, parses it, and the output are the single values that can be transferred to any destination from here. So that's all steps that are necessary in order to use the MQTT plugin.
Check out our free and fully functional demo to see for yourself how easy it is to implement in practice. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions. The OPC Router team will be happy to help.